can't look at us with these microphones. These microphones.
That's what they're called.
Haha, moving up in the world. Welcome to this fistful of videos where me and Kraig are actually going to be covering Sergio Leone's best work. We're going to be doing Fistful of Dollars for a few dollars more, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Once Upon a Time in the West, and Once Upon a Time in America in that order. Today is the very first time we've done something like this. So, the very first time we've done a Leone video, and
Yeah.
we've been wanting to do it for a while.
We
But
did watch Once Upon a Time in the West before, but we kind of just watched that for fun. We didn't do a video on it.
yeah,
But-
yeah. Which now that I have a YouTube channel, every time I watch a big movie like that and then I don't do anything about it afterwards, I feel like it was such a waste of time.
I could see that.
Imagine watching movies for like fun now. I can't.
That's kind of like when when I first started like doing streams. Every time I'd buy a game, I just wouldn't play it because I was like, I'll play it on stream eventually.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. Like,
Yeah.
But that was one of the few times that we've watched a movie and then didn't like record ourselves talking about it after, which is
I think it's because the
thing.
movie was so fucking long that we were just exhausted.
Well, we
by the end of
finished it. Yeah, we started. I don't think they care. This is a weird thing to front load the video with, but we started it at like 1 in the morning, finished it at like 4:30. But today we did A Fistful of Dollars, and it's obviously the first in the Dollars trilogy, and also the really the first time Leone was Sergio Leone. You can see all of the stuff being born in this film.
My first Clint Eastwood movie.
Yeah, because we watched Once Upon a Time in the West. I prefer Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, but we'll get to it. And anyways, it's like they're both beautiful. You know,
Yeah.
I'd be happy with either one. But A Fistful of Dollars is the only one of the 5 films we just named that I wouldn't call masterful. And but you can see all the seeds of mastery in it. You can see everything that Sergio Leone is going to harness, going to master, everything Leone is going to really just use to captivate people. Like right away, you get the fairy tale for grown-up sensibility. You get those amazing close-ups, those amazing cross-cuts, and you get the very operatic, hyperkinetic feel that really flows with Ennio Morricone's music. And even then, Morricone's music is used much better in future films. I think starting with For a Few Dollars More is when everything starts to fall into place in a truly masterful way. But this film is still super flamboyant. There's still a lot of like amazing and dazzling screen rhetoric, and you can see the genesis of brilliance. You can really see the genesis of brilliance. What did you think of it, Kraig? Initial response to it?
I mean, the opening scene was very impressive for this being like his first Western. You could definitely tell that this was the niche he was meant to fall into. He, like you said, it's kind of like a grown-up fairy tale, but beyond that, like it really does make you feel like you're stepping into this closed, like this little contained universe of its own.
Oh yeah.
And it's almost like you're following the superhero more or less, rather than just some cowboy.
Yeah, well, he's like a fairy tale kind of figure, right? The man with no name, and oh, God, Clint Eastwood. Clint Eastwood wasn't even his first choice. Interestingly, he wanted either Henry Fonda or Charles Bronson to play the role. I say interestingly because those are the stars of Once Upon a Time in the West much later on. But I mean, Clint and Sergio got along like pretty famously. Of course, Clint was a TV star at the time, working on Rawhide. And I mean, you have to put yourself in Clint's shoes, going all the way to Spain to shoot an Italian Western. Most of the people don't even speak your language, and somehow, I mean, it's really director and muse situation, like two people incredibly on the same exact page. Clint Eastwood, yeah, you're seeing the birth of a legend here. I mean, he cements it in like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, like forever. in world cinema. He cements it forever. He earns his role in the Hall of Legends, but you're seeing it being born here, and you can really see that kind of like movie magic as well. And you have anything else to say, Craig?
Um, I this being my first Clint Eastwood movie, I know that people always say that like there's so many iconic scenes that Clint Eastwood has been in, and other than the fact that over time you just kind of get to know what those are from people sharing it on social media or just talking about it, um, but you can kind of just see it happening naturally in front of you, and it's like, oh, okay, I get it, you know.
Oh yeah, it's an undeniable kind of magic that he
Like
has.
when he
He's so
first
good.
raises his hat and shows his eyes and shows you how serious he is, like there's no denying that he's gonna walk out of this without a scratch.
And a certain incredible kind of power as well. And I believe that Clint read the original script
Mm-hmm.
and said, "I have too many lines. Need to be more mysterious, harder to penetrate, psychologically or like emotionally." And I mean, it's almost unheard of for an actor to argue for less lines, but it was the right thing to do. He had just the he always Leone always gives him like the perfect amount of lines, but I guess this time was really where it was forged, that idea of a person who says less. I mean, the only time he gives any motivations for what he's doing beyond like stuff that you're kind of figuring out on your own, or like kind of motivations that you're painting onto the character itself, is when he's saying goodbye to the family that he reunited and like rescued essentially, and said like something along the lines of, "I once knew people like you, but no one was there to help them. Go, go." That's the only time he ever gives like a direct motivation
I
or
like that they
reasoning.
kept that simple because it allows you to kind of um, place your own ideas on what his backstory might be.
Yeah.
But at the same time, his backstory is not very important to the story.
No.
Um, but yeah, like his mysteriousness was very good for the film because there was a handful of times where he's doing all this weird, wacky shit, and you're just like, what the fuck is he doing? And then once it unravels itself, it clicks and it makes sense. Um, but yeah, I definitely enjoyed the fact that he was. I think he was right. It would have been ruined by too many lines. Like, um,
It's a hyper stylized, very visual kind of film. Leone is a very visual type of filmmaker. Uh, it's like I said, incredibly operatic. It's lyrical. It's musical. It's like it's very, very, very good.
mhm.
It's just also a far cry from masterful, but he was right around the corner with it. Maybe only needed was a few dollars more to really make his visions come true, kind of thing, to really realize them in their totality. And now that this has been going on for a few minutes, I'll do it. I will address the Akira Kurosawa sized elephant in the room. I didn't want to like do that at the very front of the video. I've been wanting to cover Leone for a while, and I wanted to cover his films, like I said, like in order. And the only thing keeping me from it was the fact that you can't talk about A Fistful of Dollars without talking about Yojimbo or Akira Kurosawa. And I personally basically loathe Akira Kurosawa's filmmaking. Uh, I like Akira. I think everyone on the planet likes Akira. I think his films are very weak. I don't like them at all. So I wanted to do this like a few minutes in before I pissed off like the world, kind of thing. And so this film is definitely a direct unofficial remake or rip off of Yojimbo. Um, Beat for beat almost, but that's viewing it from a narrative standpoint, and narratively, yes, they are incredibly similar, but Kurosawa's thematics are always very poor, very elementary, and it's kind of so boring. He has the most boring philosophy I could possibly think of, and I think that as cinephiles, as people who watch films for like analytical value, for the value of having your life like penetrated and like the redemptive quality of movies. We look beyond narratives. So yeah, Leone and the Italians definitely ripped off the narrative. But when does narrative actually matter when we're talking about art films and auteurs? Truly, because the thematics are what matters. Symbolically, it is very, 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 very different from Yojimbo. Rather than kind of ramble in my way, I want to read a part of this wonderful book, Something to Do with Death by Christopher Frayling, biography of Leone's, and he kind of like says what I'm going to, what I would try to say a bit more eloquently. So the puppets on the stage of A Fistful of Dollars certainly belonged more to Leone's culture than Kurosawa's. There were numerous references to the New Testament, the stranger riding his undernourished mule into San Miguel like Christ entering Jerusalem, or John Ford's young Mr. Lincoln entering Springfield, Illinois, his crucifixion on the wooden sign outside the cantina, his involvement in the Last Supper at the Rojo clan, his death and resurrection, a profusion of crosses, cemeteries, and coffins. Leone referred to the stranger as an incarnation of the angel Gabriel, an exterminating angel whose story deliberately resembled a parable. There are important references, too, to a carnivalesque tradition. These could be discerned in the chorus, the trickster hero, the unusually detailed emphasis on eating and drinking, the mockery of death, the larger-than-life gestures of the Hispanic characters, the grotesque realism of the bandits' faces, the presentation of hollowed moments from popular culture here in the Western, as if they were part of the liturgy, and a profusion of double crosses which helped to keep the audience guessing. So really, there are references to the American West as well, and there's also disenchantment. But these are far cries from what Yojimbo was trying to was trying to express. These are far cries. The symbolism belongs entirely not only to Leone but to the Italian culture. This is truly a translation of this Japanese film into an Italian art film as well. And Kurosawa himself would admit that the film was largely inspired, maybe not largely, but in part inspired by Shane, by the American Western Shane. There's quite a few similarities to it as well. There's never one original idea. I think everyone in the art world understands this, and I do understand that Leone was a bit shameless in ripping off the film, but that was the gamut. He was making a B movie after all, and yet he just happened to be like one of the best filmmakers kind of ever who at least touched the genre. And Kurosawa never wanted to touch the genre, although a lot of people like Pauline Kael thought he'd be wonderful making westerns. I mean, and that's kind of why people thought Yojimbo and, of course, the Seven Samurai, which later turned into the Magnificent Seven, thought they would be wonderful westerns. So narratively, yeah, they're very much the same. But if we're talking about like the itchy neurotic hero of Yojimbo and their class struggles and like economic situations as well, like it's a far cry from that kind of symbolism. It is truly a far cry from that.
So, yeah, I've never watched any of Akira's films, so I don't really have anything to add to that.
Oh,
Sadly.
Oh no, people have a very strong connection to Kurosawa, and it's very understandable. He is, like, even though I don't like him, he's one of the most important people in
Eastern film.
Well, world film, really. He is a building block in his own way. He really helped advance the language. I just don't get much from his use of the language that he's sometimes creating, but most of the time just reinventing. I don't exactly like it at all. It's not a carbon copy of Yojimbo. Even The Stranger's personal style, a mixture of technical skill, hard dialogue, and tight-lipped silence when it is needed, rather than the identification of a mafiosi, is half a world away from Kurosawa's shambling, itchy samurai. Like, there are quite a few differences here in this actual film. Like I said, narratively, it's so similar as to just be called a direct ripoff. But like, I personally watch films symbolically. At its best, yes, it's a translation of Yojimbo into a profusion of Italian iconography. Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah, I'd agree. I don't usually watch things for their narrative, and most of the time, when I do decide to come back to a film or something like that, is to re-up myself on the narrative because I'm like, why did I love this so much? And I can't remember what it's about. Um, is usually the characters and the philosophy, the I guess the hidden meaning behind the director's intentions that really stand out to me when I'm watching a film. The story is just a way to move all that stuff forward. You know?
Yeah, there's just some cinephiles who take it really personally. Not me attacking Kurosawa, that's almost understandable. But I've seen so many reviews of Yojimbo or A Fistful of Dollars where whoever the writer is seems just dedicated to kind of fetishizing Eastern culture within their review because us in the West are so good at fetishizing Eastern culture that like that's what they tend to do in their review and just kind of demolish Sergio Leone and devalue his work when he did quite a lot in this film to expand upon it. Sounds like I'm marginalizing Kurosawa, so I won't say that. Translated is really all that I'm saying, and it's translated into a different kind of world of symbols, and they might be symbols that I'm more familiar with, symbols that actually mean something within my own personal psychological iconographic framework, but it's true. They're symbols that move me more. I don't respond in any sort of visible way to most of the symbols in Kurosawa's films.
It's kind of odd. Maybe it's because Kurosawa stands out so much to so many people, but so many stories are retold and remade and
yeah, that was one of Leone's points when he was charged with this.
They'll be refashioned to fit a new setting, and in my opinion, the closest comparison you can make to a samurai is a cowboy. So it's a perfect setting if you want to retell that story.
It's not just your opinion. I mean, the Ronin, people have been saying that forever, and then that's kind of why we've had, like I said, from Seven Samurai to Magnificent Seven, including quite a few others. The genre styles are remarkably similar, and maybe this is some sort of Western bias on my part as well for enjoying the Western iconography of Sergio Leone's spaghetti Western films. But at the same time, I am of the West, and those are the symbols that I appreciate more. I also think that Leone's style of filmmaking is much more operatic, much more hyperkinetic. I think he's a better composer of images. I think he's more lyrical than Kurosawa. I think he's more visceral than Kurosawa, and I think he's much more emotional than Kurosawa, much more emotional than anyone gives Leone credit for. Like a film like Once Upon a Time in America, for instance, is probably one of the most tragic films about the human condition I've ever seen, and you can see seeds of that in A Fistful of Dollars. Leone has more emotionality, in his pinky nail than Kurosawa does an entire catalog of films that are championed for being so like fucking incredible for some reason or so moving for some others. I think Leone is an incredible filmmaker, and he's often marginalized because he was a genre filmmaker. You know, I think he was absolutely incredible, and A Fistful of Dollars is a million times better than Yojimbo for me. There's something about Kurosawa's filmmaking that feels kind of superficially incomplete as well. They don't feel like a full composition because they're missing that visceral impact. They're missing that operatic one, and Leone puts on a damn good opera. You know, Fairy Tale for Grown-Ups and A Fistful of Dollars is incredible. The ones that we're going to do are like going to be even better. You know, getting into For a Few Dollars More. And I think that's incredible. And it also stars Gian Volanti as well, who was Ramon in this film.
Yep.
Wonderful villain. Everything is 10 times better and For a Few Dollars More, including him. He plays the villain in that movie as well, and he's a million times better. Oh my God, what a good villain. But starting from the next film on, we're going to be talking about like mastery. We're going to be talking about masterpieces. I think that all of them are nearly flawless in their own ways, but especially Good, the Bad, and the Ugly and Once Upon a Time in America, I think are ridiculously astonishing. But we have to start with Point A. And Point A is still a wonderful trip to go down. I was just not looking forward to talking about Akira Kurosawa. I don't like talking about him. I tend to make I tend to alienate viewers when I talk about Akira Kurosawa, uh, because of how strongly I dislike his movies. But you know, gotta well, break a few eggs if you're
I mean,
gonna make an omelet.
you got to be honest. You know, you can't just
Gotta be omelet.
dumb joke.
You laughed. You gave it like the credence, the credibility. You gave it
Yeah.
validity, sir.
That's fair.
You see, I translated.
But as far as it standing on its own, as in not being compared to what was it, Yojimbo?
Yojimbo, but it should be too. I'm not saying it shouldn't be.
Yeah, but we've covered that.
Yeah.
So now we can say more about the film on its own. And plus, I haven't seen Yojimbo, so it's hard for me to compare the two.
Yeah.
But yeah, like if I were to compare this just to his later works, because I've only seen one of his other films, and it's much later into his film career.
It's really just Once Upon a Time in the West was like 69, I think, and this one was 64. So it's really he got so much better so fast.
That's
like,
pretty impressive.
Isn't
because
it?
because like this film, when I say it's so like self-contained,
it really is.
That's both a positive, like he did a really good job with what he had available to him, but at the same time it just could not reach that grand scale that Once Upon a Time in the West had.
Yeah.
You know, not only is the film longer in Once Upon a Time, but it's just larger.
I wouldn't even just limit it to the amount of sets, the amount of characters. I would limit it to like the amount of like visceral kinetic energy, because
and
like
he really found,
you saw the seeds of it here though, and it was cutting in between people. Like you saw it almost there, because the best part of a Leone movie is when 3 or 2 people are staring at each other for 15 minutes. Those are the best parts.
I was just about to say, like, you can definitely tell that in this movie he hasn't caught on to the fact of how powerful silence is in his films, because these films, when compared to Once Upon a Time in the West, it's way faster. Everything's much more quick.
Or if you're going to have music, make sure it directly informs the image that you're seeing on screen. Like Morricone had a nice score here, but the scores for Once Upon a Time in the West or his future films, like it matches, it informs. It's like a conversation between image and score, and that's the way it should be. It wasn't necessarily that way in this film. So even when you're not having silence, make sure that the music informs the content.
He also, I think that one of the weaknesses of this film was he focused a little bit too much on the Man Without a Name. I would have loved for them to fully characterize these other characters as well, because like in Once Upon a Time in the West, like there's like 5 main characters, or at least it feels such, because of how well he builds them up. With the bad guy, like they're definitely there and they're definitely impressive, but other than the main one, the other ones just eventually just fell into the background and didn't even matter.
And he didn't even know how to use Gian Volante that well yet. The one he decided would be Ramon, the main one. Like he knows how to use him in the next one. And this one, like I'm sure in the editing room you saw like, oh, this is what I should have done with him. This is how I could have made him the villain, the fairy tale villain I wanted to make him to be. And he was almost there, because there are moments that are almost there, like just a step away from it. And yeah, all his next films, the Man with No Name is not. There's multiple main characters in all of his next movies. Man with No Name, you can certainly argue is the main character of them, but even The Good and the Bad and the Ugly, obviously 3, and then for a few dollars more, there's 3 as well. 3 different characters with their own ambitions, goals, and fates.
That'll be something to look forward to because that was definitely something that I felt this movie was missing was the back and forth of it.
Oh, and just wait till you get like Lee Van Cleef and like Eli Wallach, these masters, like these master presences on film, like to add to Clint Eastwood, which we've already noted is quite a presence. Imagine if you had other legends like Lee Van Cleef there. It'll blow your mind when we get
Yeah.
just
So
the next one, really.
this film's definitely great,
Well,
but
it would make no
it's not.
sense to just jump into the second one, you
Yeah.
know? Like, we have to do this one, and also maybe it'll let you see how far he comes so fast. We're
Mhm.
talking the next four films over such a small period of time, like a 5 year period of time, man. Like every year he was just becoming more and more brilliant.
He's probably one of those people that just dives into his work.
Well, I think, like you said, he found. I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if in the editing room he figured out that this was his calling to make these exact kinds of movies. Because certain things you don't find out until you're in the editing room, where like, oh, I could have.
Mm-hmm.
But next time I'll know. I'll know to have these motifs and make them musical, visceral, violent, and violently uh, communicating with each other.
Because there was a lot of scenes, like you said, that were almost there.
Almost.
Like
The scene with the hostage exchange was like almost there. It was so close, so
yeah,
close.
yeah, but they resolved it way too fast. Um,
Well, yeah, he'll learn patience later on, and he'll learn that an audience will sit through 15 minutes of three men staring at
oh,
each
dude,
other in a cemetery.
like, I would say like one of the things that he does very very well, um, and he even did it quite a few times in Fistful of Dollars. He's really really good with tension.
Yeah, but like he gets more involved with the tension later
Yeah.
on. Like, you saw Once Upon a Time in the West.
Oh,
Like,
dude,
how
the
long did
opening
harmonica
scene.
player and Blue Eyes stare at each other? Like,
The
20
very
minutes.
opening scene where you just hear the water dripping and the fly flying around that dude's face,
Yeah.
and like it's like a 15-minute intro before that guy even steps off the train, and they're all just staring at each other, and like you don't even know who these people
Yeah.
are or what's going on, but you're sitting on the edge of your seat wondering what's going to happen next.
10 to 15 minute intro for 15 seconds tops of violence.
Yeah.
I also loved when Clint Eastwood went in there after the hostage exchange or whatever, and like he actually went to go liberate and free the woman. When he went in there and boom, 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 and then picked up a machete. And I've read in several places that was Leone almost, I wouldn't say mocking Yojimbo, but like having him run around with a machete and throw it into people's chests like a sword. It doesn't happen in any other Leone movie but this one. And it's done rather in a very campy, contrived way. So I want to say that is Leone going like, I know what you're going to say. And I know. I know. Okay.
Yeah, and yeah, I do think that this film is a great, like it's just a great start in the sense that, well, once it's the first film, but two, um it's a very good example of all his building blocks just kind of being like they're kind of being brought together, but they're not properly placed yet.
Yeah.
You can see that they're all present, they're just not correctly put together.
And it's really good for the revitalization, the revolution of the Western being reinvented too. I think that by this time, Hollywood had, I know that Hollywood had basically given up on the Western by the 60s. I think like 9% of the output of studios or less than that were Westerns, whereas just a decade before it was nearly half, and a decade before that it was even more. People were falling out of love with Westerns until something dynamic happened. You got a filmmaker who was like this full of dynamite and completely revolutionized a genre and made it worth getting excited about again, because you were seeing things you never saw before. Starting from that opening title sequence, which was very incredibly visual. I guess that it was in response to like Doctor No opening title sequence, like the James Bond stuff. Like, so like it wasn't entirely unique on Leone's part, but it made it exciting. That wasn't what you normally saw in a western. A western was dull, and 007 was hot and interesting at the moment. So I mean, he just translated the language of the British spy film into an Italian western, which is phenomenal to me. Craig, I have to go soon. You have any final thoughts?
Um, Not really. No. I'm very curious as to. It makes me think what happened to the Western, but that would be an entire
Oh, it's kind of,
conversation.
yeah, it goes through ups and downs, doesn't it? But
Yeah, because there's no Westerns being made today.
we'll talk about that at Once Upon a Time in the West and see where the Western is now at the end of that.
Okay.
And next week we'll or I don't even know next. I don't know how what I saw. Okay, so this goes out once a week. I guess I just decided that subconsciously. But we'll have a lot more to say about For a Few Dollars More, I'm sure. It's thematically a lot more fascinating. It's grappling. It's interesting. Philosophically, it's moving, and visually, it's whoa. It's amazing.
We'll have a few more things to say.
Yeah, we'll have a fistful of ideas in this one. We'll have a few more ideas next one. Thank you for watching.